Om Harihi Om. Last class we had discussed of the Swara Kutumba, the family, the genealogy, the pedigree of the Swaras. In this class we shall look at the Akshara Kutumba. What exactly are the Aksharas? Now Akshara, you know, is a synonym of Varna. So the Akshara family has only two branches, unlike the Swaras. Now the two branches are the Purna or the Gunita family and the Samyukta or the conjunct family. The Purna is the full vowel, full letter. It literally means the full letter. And the Samyukta means a conjunct letter. So what is a Purna? The definition of Purna is a Vyanjana plus a Swara. A Vyanjana along with a Swara is called a Purnakshara. Purnakshara. And then the Samyukta or the Samyukta is defined as a Vyanjana plus a Vyanjana. So a Samyukta Akshara will be a Vyanjana plus Vyanjana, whereas a Purnakshara is with a Vyanjana with a Swara. So what is just a Swara plus Swara? Oh, it has no meaning. So what is a Swara plus Vyanjana? That also does not have a meaning. A Swara is independent by itself. So the only family which originates from the Vyanjanas are these two, which is the Purna and the Samyukta, based on what the second letter will be. If the second letter is a Swara along with a Vyanjana, it will be called a Purna. If the second letter itself is also another Vyanjana along with the first Vyanjana, it will be called a Samyukta Akshara. That's it. For example, in this Rudram, in an excerpt from the Yajurveda, we see the na is pronounced as na, which means n, the half Vyanjana, with a. That will be a Purnakshara. Yes, a Vyanjana with the Swara will be a Purnakshara. Ma, similarly, m and a will be Purna. S, t, a, s and t. What will that be? S and t. What will that be? Sa and ta. Vyanjana plus Vyanjana. It will be a Samyukta Akshara, right? The third one will be the Samyukta Akshara. Ru. What is that? R and U. Ru. Vyanjana and Swara Purna. Dra. D, R, A. There are two Vyanjanas here. D and R. So it will be a Samyukta Akshara. The fifth one is the Samyukta Akshara. Sixth one is Ma. M, A. Vyanjana and Swara Purna. Nya. N and Ya. Two. So it is a Samyukta Akshara. Then Va. V and A. Purna Akshara. You can try it out for the rest of them. Now, there are two kinds of addition. So you see the addition symbol here? Yes. So there are two kinds of additions. One is the Samhita addition, where you just join the letters without any change in either of them. For example, when you're writing Sa and Th, you just join them. Neither is Sa getting altered, nor is the Th. You just say st, that is just Samhita. Similarly here, nya, n, y, nya, that is Samhita. Whereas a Sandhi is when you join two letters by bringing a certain change in them, in either of them. For example, here you have Uta. When you split this word Utota, it actually is Uta and Uta. The second position here, which you see as To, is actually Uta and Uta. So why did it become To? That's exactly what a Sandhi is. When the U in the second word, the Uta, and the first letter is also Uta, when they combined, there was a certain change. That U became O. So it becomes Utota. Right? Uta and Uta was the original thing, which was meant to be, which was what was meaningful. There is no word called Utota as it is. There is a word called Uta, which means or. Or it also means and, A and D. You read that, right? And or, that means Uta and or. Uta. Ishave Namaha, that's it. There is just Samhita. Ishave and Namaha. Namaste astu dhanvane bahubhyamutate namaha. Here also, if you were to combine te and a, okay, that would be a sandhi called the Pura Rupa, which is a swara sandhi, which means you're combining two swaras there, but it is not combined here. But if you were to combine it for the sake of enjoying this learning and understanding better, then it would become namastestu. Namastestu. The a will have disappeared when you did this. When you will have done the sandhi. Wow. When you will have done the sandhi, then the a will have disappeared. So it will become namastestu. That a will disappear. So that is called a sandhi because there's a change in either of them. Now here, bahubhyam uta. The two words are bahubhyam and uta. Now when you see that ma, which had to be here as with the halanta, ma is combining with the uta as it is. You're just combining one vyanjana with a swara to make a purna akshara without causing change in either of them. Neither has ma changed, nor has u changed. So that is a samhita. Now coming to the Devanagari, so all of this has been just about Sanskritam. All of it has been the grammatical and the phonetic aspects of Sanskritam. But now how am I going to represent them? If you have come so far through this series, I think you would have already known at least a little bit of Devanagari. You could have picked up a little bit of Devanagari, but here is a formal way of defining all of this. So Devanagari Lipi is a script which is used generally for Sanskritam, but it is not limited to Sanskritam. Even many other languages like the Marathi, Hindi, and probably even Nepali also uses the Devanagari Lipi, which is a script. A script is different from a language. A language is what is spoken. Bhashyate iti bhasha. What is spoken is a bhasha, is a language. Lipi means limpati athva lipyate, which is stuck onto a parchment paper, because that was when these scripts evolved. On a parchment paper, they used to stick the link or stick the ink there. So it would get stuck onto the paper. So it is called lipi, meaning which gets stuck, which gets imprinted. That is a Devanagari. The name of such a script is Devanagari. One of them is Devanagari. There have been many others, but Devanagari is generally used for Sanskritam. English is not a good script. The Roman script is not good for representing Sanskritas, the Sanskritas alphabet. However, any other Indian language, preferably the Devanagari or the Kannada or probably even the Telugu script, can be used as a good representative or the good equivalent to Devanagari to represent the Sanskrita alphabet. I'm not sure of the Bengali script or the Gujarati thing. Anyone who can help me here, do please be kind enough to leave your suggestions in the comments below. The Devanagari Lipi is very logical. So whatever the pronunciation, the Purnakshara that you want to represent, which means a Vyanjana plus a Swara, that goes as it is. Now, when you're combining a Vyanjana with a Swara, only for a, you don't have to do anything. You have to just take out the pure halanta chinha. So that becomes ka, k, a, ka. Then k, a, ka. So now to represent a, you have to just put a line beside it. So ka. Then k, e, ki. So the k being the base remains as it is with little change. And there have been additions of the swara. So ki is the left bar. Then the ki towards the right. Ku, ku, kr, kr, kl, ke, kai, ko, and cow. You see the similarity here? O, ow, all of that. So now this is not, this is to be learned and practiced well. This is just a formal way of introducing it. So there are many other probably websites and books where you can practice Devanagari Lipi a lot, which is very similar to the Hindi Lipi, which is why people confuse Sanskritam as Hindi most of the times, especially the foreigners. And also here you see K and the Anuswara. It's actually only the Bindu is called the Anuswara, but is used for pronunciation. You can't combine an Anuswara with the Vyanjana. They repel each other. You have to use the independent letter, which is the Swara in between. So it becomes K, A, M, Kam, K, A, Kaha, Kaha. That's right. Kaha. Now here are all the swaras. And here is another example with P. Using P, you add A, it becomes Pa. P plus A, Pa. P yuk E, P. P yuk means plus in Sanskritam. P yuk E, P. P yuk U, Pu. P yuk U, Pu. And so on. You can try it. It's a good tables game you can play. P yuk A, Pa. P yuk A, Pa. P yuk E, P. P yuk E, P. And so on. Now, quickly rushing through the Devanagari Lipi. Now here we see that if it is a Samyuktakshara, then you'll have to, it's very logical. You just combine the first half letter and use the half form of the first Vyanjana, which means, what is a Samyuktakshara? If you remember, it is Vyanjana plus Vyanjana, right? Yes. Now, if the first one, which is going to be pronounced half, for example, in the word akka, akka, you pronounce ka twice, and the first ka comes half. So the half letters, the first Vyanjana, which is going to be the half one, is going to be written half. Okay. It's going to be written half like this. K and K. You just write K, K. You pronounce it again. You emphasize the K, K, K. And similarly with K and K, it becomes Kha, Kha. Prakhedate, prakhedate, prakhedate. Then K and G, G, G. This is quite difficult to pronounce it. K, G, G, K, G, K. And then Kung, Kung, Kung. Now, so the rule is, whichever is the half one, whichever is pronounced first, comes first. Well, it is written also. Whichever it is going to be pronounced fully after the Samyukta Akshara, that is going to be written fully. That's it. Simple as that. A direct relation. So every Vyanjana has its own symbol for the half consonant. So just as you see here, which is written half, every other Vyanjana also has that half form of it. So whenever you want to use K and Sh, you have to use the half form of K and the half form, the full form of Sh. And if you say, if you want to use, you want to say Ganga, where you want to say the Ng, which is just half, and Ga, which is the full. So Ng has to be, the half form of Ng has to be used. This is the full form, but you have to look at a table of Devanagari where you find the half form of Ng. So the half consonant is depicted as with the Halanta Chinha that we have discussed already. Otherwise, if you remove the Halanta Chinha, it becomes a Purnakshara. It means K and A. K. If you can refer the previous video, see, there is no Halanta here. If there is a Halanta, it means a pure Vyanjana, the half consonant. Otherwise, it means a full vowel. I mean, a full consonant with the vowel A. Which is what the confusion was probably for the North Indian languages which were derived from Sanskrita, where they used to take away the last A. So you would say Krishna, which is full A in Sanskritam. It would become Krishna, Krishna. That half thing would go away. And this confusion exists probably in the North Indian languages. Badla, Badlav. Although that the is actually half when you pronounce it, you say Badlav, you write it as Badalav, Badalav. Why is that? You have to ask the Hindi people. Otherwise, it has a default in it if you are following the Devanagari Lipi, which is what Hindi, Sanskritam, Marathi is derived from. So you have to be careful, but that depends on which lip, even if it is Devanagari, and if you specify it is going to be Hindi, the language that is written as Hindi, then there has to be certain changes in the rules that you have to make. So now there are special characters even in Devanagari, which we'll see next. So now this rule, which seems very simple and very obvious, in fact is actually obvious, but many languages such as English do not have such an obvious rule, that the half consonants which are pronounced first, for example in the word Ganga, or you say kta, yukta, when you say here itself yukta, you pronounce k only half. You say k, you don't say yukata, you don't say yukata, you say yukta, kta. So that is the half consonant. The k consonant is getting half, is getting hard, and therefore you have to use the half form of the k. That is what this means. And you have not put this k after the k. That would be silly because you're pronouncing k first. You say yukta, you don't say yutka, you don't say yutka. That is a different thing entirely. You say yukta, right? So in that order of pronunciation, you write down the lipi as well. So you say yukta. As you write, so you read. As you pronounce, so you write it down. Yukta. That's very simple. And so here are some special characters. Now you see the Devanagari stretches almost half of India, throughout half of India. So all of these states with their official languages have used the Devanagari script. The Devanagari has quite a lot of special characters. Here is the table for it. Some of them have been listed. Th and r becomes thr. And now these are just simple conjuncts, but they are written in a different form for brevity. So you say the and ya becomes dia. This is the symbol for it. The pronunciation remains the same, but the way you write it down is slightly different. Now this again is just to demonstrate that there are some special characters in Devanagari. But what exactly they are, you can either learn it from here or from or in detail from the other books of Devanagari script. Now the last two concepts are the Trota and the Mela. Trota meaning splitting, split a word into its constituent letters. So for example, in Samskrita being phonetic, it means however you pronounce a word, so you write it down, and however you write it, it just depicts the way the letters are arranged. And from these, by reading these letters, you can know what the original word was. For example, see this word here. How do you pronounce it? First of all, you split it after having a good knowledge of Devanagari, of course. You split it into its constituent letters, which is s, m, and then r. Then you put the th and then the e. So now you read it together. You say smriti, smriti. You read it quickly, it becomes smriti. That is what the pronunciation of this word is. Also, you can just go the other way, which is what the mela will be. You combine, you read each of them together, it becomes the original word. Smriti, smriti, which is called the mela. So trota is if you already know the pronunciation of the word, which is smriti. How do you split it? You first go in slow-mo. You say smriti. Someone told you some word like devara. How would you split it as? You go in slow-mo. Devara. That would be the slow-mo form of it. And from there, you can identify what are the constituent letters. So it is easy. So there has never been a spell bee contest in Sanskrit because it is very phonetic. You address a letter by its own pronunciation. You don't call the r the ru. You don't call the r as er or something like that. You don't call the e as I. You call e as it is to be pronounced as e. That's it. So you say smriti, it becomes smriti, smriti. And some more complicated words here. Jyotisham patihi, Jyotisham patihi. You try changing the settings of the YouTube video to 0.5 or something like that. Then and you pronounce any word you want, that will be read in slow-mo itself, and there you can make out the constituent letters. J, yo, y, o, t, I, sh, a, p, t, I. Jyotisham patihi. That's the how you break it down. That is called throat, breaking it. Similarly, yaf phalanir. This is the f. Ya, y, a, phalanir, ya. So you are p, l, nir, ya. But all of this requires a good knowledge of Devanagari. I'm reminding you. Now this is a good one. Kartsnenarti haram. How will that be? K-a-r. First the r comes. Then tsnenarti haram. K-a-r tsn yo e-na-art haram. Kartsnenarti haram. Okay, that is trota. Then we have the mela, which is combining, which is if you are given a set of letters. Now all of this exercise is just to prove that Samskrita is phonetic. That is, it can be 100% or maybe 99.99% read as is spoken, written as is pronounced, and pronounced as is written, all of them. So when you want to make a word, you can just combine the individual letters as they are and make the entire word. So you say Jeshtha. You read it quickly, it becomes Jeshtha. Now, wow, now this is such a long word. Let's just see. Rudra, Rudradhyayapa, Phyakramaha. So it is Rudradhyaya Pathyakramaha. Then Varshneyaha Yah Krishnaha Varshneyak Yah Krishnaha Varshne. See, this is F with the left beak is the F. This is the right beak with the Ach. Varshneyak Krishnaha. Krishnaha. Then, now this is the longest one here. Gokshi Ra Pn Abud Ava Vrishtihi. What is that? Gokshira Pena Budbuda Vrishtihi. Wow. Gokshira Phena Budbuda Vrishtihi. That is the mela form. Coming to the last aspect, which is after we have learned how to write, how to pronounce, and all of that, now we are ready to make some words. Come on, you have been going on and on for 12 videos about just letters. But where are the words? Yes, now we are entering words. Now see, everything in Samskrita is precisely defined. There is no room for confusion. Not as much room for confusion as any other language in the entire world. So now, in Sanskritam, so the word which is called the padam is defined as a collection of letters, the avarna samuha, which is derivable through Prakriti Pratyaya system. So now what is this Prakriti Pratyaya system? That has been explained in the video already. Go through that. So Prakriti Pratyaya simply is just the dhatu and the pratyaya form. So the system where you can reduce any word into its constituent dhatu and a pratyaya, a suffix and the root word, which is called the dhatu, is through the Prakriti Pratyaya system. That is accepted in the Vedic or the classic convention. So it is a word should either be derivable through the Prakriti Pratyaya system, or it has come down through generations as a convention. For example, this is called the Rudhanama, which means, for example, a pigeon. A pigeon is called a kapota. Now that is not derivable into any dhatu like kapa or something or another pratyaya called uta. It is not derivable in that way. So it has come down by convention, which has been assigned a particular meaning of a pigeon, of a bird with such and such characteristics. That is called a convention. That is called the rudha. It should either be a rudha born by convention or by the Vedas, or through Prakriti Pratyaya system, which is the dhatu and a pratyaya derivation. Now, dhatu, to recap, is called the Prakriti here. The dhatu is a combination or a collection of letters, and so is a pratyaya. For example, in the word karaniya, the dhatu will be the kar, the aniya will be the pratyaya. None of them are complete in their meanings. The kar means to do, aniya is should do, should. So should do is karaniya. Something which should be done is karaniya. In that way, the word karaniya is derivable by the Prakriti Pratyaya system. And an example for the convention is already given as kapota. Now, so a word born of this, which is kar and aniya, together combines their meanings, their constituent meanings, which is should be done, do, or something like that. So it becomes should be done. So karaniya is should be done. That way. And this karaniya, which is born from the dhatu and the pratyaya, is called the pratipadika, which is, it literally means before the pada, the step, the raw form before becoming a complete pada, a complete word in Sanskritam. And here word does not mean the English word. It means the way that a padam is defined in Sanskritam. So that is the pratipadika, before the, or going to become a pada. The last step, the penultimate step of a pada. And finally, when this pratipadika has been refined, has been seasoned or been tempered with the ting pratyayas, another set of pratyayas, or the final touch with the sup pratyayas, any of these, it becomes a complete word. Then it has evolved to become a complete word in Sanskritam called the pada. For example, the dhatu mud combines with a pratyaya called, a vikarana pratyaya called shap, it becomes moda, and then that is the pratipadika, also called the anga. That becomes, when it joins with the ting pratyaya to become a verb, which one of the ting pratyaya is te, so it becomes modate. It means he enjoys or she enjoys. It enjoys. That is a complete meaning of modate. Only then is it said to be a complete word, a padam. Until then, it is called a pratipadika. The moda is called the pratipadika. Similarly, the mudita. Mudita is happiness. Okay. So now mud is the dhatu again. Ita is the pratyaya which we spoke here. Ita is the pratyaya, so it becomes mudita. Now this is the it has become the pratipadika. It has not yet combined either with the thing or the supratyayas. It has combined with the pratyaya called the ita, which is of a different category, of a different kind. But it has neither joined with thing nor with sup. Therefore, it has remained in the state of pratipadika. If you say mudita, when you put the sup pratyaya, it becomes mudita in the strilinga, in the feminine. It becomes she who is happy, mudita. She who is joyous, mudita. Now that is how a sup pratyaya also is combined to become a. Now mudita in the dirgha form is a complete word, which is padam. Now this padam mudita or modate, that is the structural unit of a sentence, which means many such words combine to form a sentence. A pada packs one or more bits of information. For example, in the bit mudita, it combines two bits of information, which is it is the past participle of being joyous. So she was happy, or the past tense of it. So that ita is where the bit of information that it has already happened, or she's already happy has come. That is the ita, and mud is what has already happened is mud. The joy has already happened. So both these information are combined together in a pack of padam. Now we discussed that the word is the building block of the padam is the building block of vakyam. So then vakya, what will be defined as? Again, precise definition that a vakyam is a collection of pada. That is, it is built up of padas alone, which has only one verb. So in an entire sentence to be called a Samskrita vakyam, it has to have only one verb, which need not be always explicit. It can be implicit, but that verb should be, that idea should be that it should have only one verb. For example, Saraswati Chitram Pashyati. Saraswati is one word, Chitram second, Pashyati is a third word. So now in this sentence, is it a sentence or is it just any collection of words? In that sense, just an entire book can be called as sentence if a sentence is defined as just a collection of words, is it not? An entire article can be just said to be a one sentence because all of it is just a collection of words. That is not right. In the Sanskritam, however, a vakyam has an end, and it is not just arbitrarily defined as just a collection. It is a collection which has only one verb. So the moment you have another verb in the collection, it means another sentence has begun. So one sentence is equal to one verb is equal to one sentence. That's the double implication, an equivalence. So although this rule is actually in definition and mostly in practice, but there are a few exceptions where you say saha pashyati gacchati cha. However, such a usage is, according to me, not good. Although it is acceptable to some scholars, through the logical definition of a vacuum, you would, and a vacuum does not just mean anywhere you put that vertical line that marks the end of a sentence. That is true, but however, there's a grammatical definition itself, which is more comprehensive. So you have to just say saha pashyati, saha gacchati. That is implied in that sentence when you say saha gacchati pashyati cha. He goes and he sees. But the actual way how it should be understood is saha gacchati, he goes, and then saha pashyati cha, and he also sees. So one sentence is just one verb. This has to sink into people's mind. Now this, although this rule is quite a lot violated in some of the Vedas, but Vedas are an exception to everything in general. And a classical literature, like in the example that I just said, there are a few instances where such a rule is violated, but it is there in practice. This is a good way to move forward. For example, in the picture here, we see Mama Nama Abhila, probably it is Abhilashaha. Now then, so now where is the verb here? Mama Nama Abhila, all the three seem to be nouns. So where is the verb? Yes, see the definition here, the vakyam is, it should be a collection of pada, which it is, but it should have one verb. There seemingly is not a verb, but it can be an implicit, it can be an adhyahara. So what does it mean? My name is Abhilash, Abhilasha. My name is, where the is actually a verb, which is not apparent here. So it means Mama Nama Abhilasha Asti. That Asti is the adhyahara, which is the implication. Adhyahara, Mama Nama Abhilasha. What does it mean? My name Abhilash. That seems grammatically wrong even in English. So there, although it is quite common in Sanskritam to say Mama Nama Abhilashaha, there the implication, the adhyahara is Asti. There is what? A name, whose name? My name, called Abhilashaha. So Mama Nama Abhilashaha Asti. That way an adhyahara can be allowed to complete a meaning, the meaning of a sentence. So now the sentence can be of these kinds. One is assertive, called the lat. The lat lakara. Lakara is the mood. The lat lakara is where you are generally asserting something, a fact, a theory, or a thought, an observation, an event, etc. Is all of that is an assertive sentence. It's an assertion that forms the majority of all of the literature. If you see on science and arts, etc., all of that forms the assertive statements. All of those are assertive. Then interrogative, some part of it is interrogative, which is where you ask a question using the kakara, where you start questions with always ka. Those are the interrogative, or sometimes also with the va or some other avyayas. These are the interrogative sentences where you have a question. Then the imperative are where you dictate someone or dictate how it should be, or you wish something, you curse or praise them, or you order or request something. That is called the lot lakara, or now all the three lakaras of lot, vidhiling, and ashirling are covered in this. Now what are these lakaras you're speaking of? Now these are covered in another video. Please check that out. Then the narrative. A narrative sentence is where you describe something which has happened in the past, a history, a story, or an account. All of this belong to the past, and there are again three lakaras to discuss the past events in such sentences, which is the lit, lung, and the lang lakaras. Then predictive, or what is going to happen in the future, is some aspirations, some predictions, or some imaginations. All of that. Now here past concerns memory, future concerns imagination. So here predictive, there are only two lakaras, which is the lit and the lut lakaras here. And also some would say even the ring lakara goes here. I would agree with them. Ring lakara also comes here. So 3 or 2. And then interjective is where you express poetically some wonderment, some agreement. You say Is that a sentence? Yes, it is. Because you're agreeing something. So it is bhavatu. Yes, let it happen. That is an agreement. So na is a dissent. That is a sentence by itself. Na, no. Then wonder. Aho, ha is sorrow, pain. All of these are interjective sentences, interjections. These can also be considered as independent sentences because they're expressing an entire idea through words. So which is the definition of a language, as well as they have the necessary collection of padas. It could be just one pada also, but if it has an adhyahara, which is aho bhavatu, then bhavatu is the implicit adhyahara. Then finally coming to the prabandha. Now we have learned what are sentences. Now what is a prabandha? Again, a prabandha is any set of vakyas. So one or more vakya can be considered a prabandha, a composition. You are putting together, you are stitching together vakyas. So that is called prabandha. So you need some art to stitch together any two things. You need at least some basic sense. So that is why a composition should, although it is a collection of a set of vakyas, they should have some sequence in them, some logical sequence which the idea demands. It may be present as a logic in a sequential manner, but it need not be also, but it is solely the authority of the writer, the author. However, in an essay, there should be a comprehensive list of ideas that you are expressing one after the other with necessary paragraphs. All of that is then as an essay on a particular theme which is being discussed. The literature, however, is just the entire corpus of compositions. All these compositions that you've written on every single topic by every person till date, from the beginning of that language till now, is all of that literature. So stretching through time and space and the person, whoever has written it, and the concept that has been discussed in that sentences, in those sentences, all of that is put under literature. And this literature is broadly classified into two, Kala and Shastra. Kala is the literature on art, all art forms, be it performing arts, fine arts, social arts like whatever, history, ethnography, all of that. All of that, since they have an aesthetic theme, aesthetic appeal to the mind, they are called Kala. These are concerning the mind. Now the Shastras. The Shastras these are methodological, logical sequences of sentences on all kinds of sciences. That is, any analytic thing which has been discussed, which appeals to the intellect, like logic, maths, philosophy, sciences like biology, etc. Technology, technological advancement, that is, theology, social sciences, all of them are put under the Shastra category. Finally, all of them, Kala, Shastra, and everything else put together is called the Vangmaya in Sanskrita. Vangmaya, completely filled with words. Everything is word, and word is just letters, and letters are also called Vak, Akshara, and all of that just boils down to just a collection of letters sprinkled through a parchment paper or whatever the substrate is. So it is we who gave the meaning to those words. It is we who assign meanings to a sentence, to padam. It is we who make things up. It is we who can change their meaning, interpret them differently, and all of that commentaries follows from that. So Vak is the feminine aspect, the constant fixed expression. The interpretation is the artha, the masculine aspect, which is prone to changes in both the person interpreting it, the time that he interprets in, and the region that he belongs to, and the cultural mindset. So all of that is put under Vangmaya. With that, let's end this series. So we shall start this next series soon, which should be about this Vangmaya, deeper aspects of that, as well as the sandhis and the other grammatical portions that we have left out. Dhanyavadaha.